Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Severe weather is not new to North Carolina. Constituents in my district and across the state have been hit by hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, ice, and snowstorms. NOAA's Office of Marine Aviation Operations manages and operates NOAA's specialized ships and aircraft that are responsible for a range of critical research and collecting environmental data. This includes the P-3 aircraft that fly into tropical cyclones, collecting essential data that improves the intensity and tracks of hurricane forecasts by 10 to 15% and 15 to 20%, respectively. The two nearly 50-year-old P-3 aircraft will reach their end of life in 2030. The intended replacement aircraft, the C-130s, will take at least 6 years to become operational. While the proposed budget ensures the P-3 aircraft will remain operational through 2030, I'm concerned with the lack of detail on the plan to replace those aircraft and acquire the new C-130s that were highlighted as a priority. As you're aware, your weather research missions are increasingly put at risk if the acquisition plan is not on schedule. What's your plan to ensure that there's no gap in the data that the P-3 planes collect?
Thank you, Ranking Member Ross, for raising this very important issue. I'll start by saying that you will see no compromise in our mission capability in the years to come, especially tied to hurricane reconnaissance and forecast. As you indicated, we're planning for the replacement of the two P-3s with up to 4 aircraft. That's part of an aircraft recapitalization plan that took several years to develop, is well thought out and well justified. We've already started down that path through the resources provided in the supplemental appropriation. We have begun contracts for purchase of the first of those C-130 replacements, and the intent, as funds are available, is to include options on that contract for 3 additional aircraft.
And how would any budget cuts affect that?
Budget cuts, obviously, no part of our mission is optional, and budget cuts would undoubtedly delay, or dare I say, depending on the specific guidance we get with respect to cuts, actually defer that kind of acquisition. And the main point then is we will lose that, as you indicated, anywhere from 15 to 30% improvement in our capability to forecast those storms. But I also want to point out that we have another aircraft. So when we talk about the Hurricane Hunters, we also have a high altitude aircraft, a Gulfstream 550 right now that we use, and we've got resources through the Inflation Reduction Act to purchase an additional high altitude aircraft, and we have started that contract negotiation as well. So we're well on the way in terms of contracts and acquisitions to have 2 aircraft under construction for purchase by NOAA this year.
Great. Next question. The important work being done across NOAA cannot be done without its workforce, and I represent some of the workforce. I want to highlight specifically the National Weather Service in the Raleigh office and the work they do in providing severe weather and climate forecasts and warnings that help protect lives, property, and more of constituents in my district and in the surrounding areas. Having a robust and diverse workforce is critical for NOAA to effectively carry out its mission. However, being competitive with the private sector, recruiting diverse experts, and strict work policies seem to be challenges that NOAA faces in recruiting and retaining people. Can you expand on NOAA's effort to recruit and retain its workforce, as well as your DEI efforts?
Yes, thank you for that. I couldn't be prouder of our workforce, so I love being able to talk about our ability to recruit and retain. We have, I would argue, one of the most dedicated and highly professional workforces in the federal government. The challenges of bringing people in, especially as we come out of COVID and try to ensure that we are meeting our mission, but also attending to the work-life balance requirements that people have, has required us to put policies in place to make sure that we can accommodate people's needs and provide real opportunities. I would start by saying it's our mission that attracts most people into NOAA. A lot of folks are excited about working on improvements to weather forecasting, fisheries management, tsunami warnings, everything we do. We are exploiting, I should say, heavily using a number of tools like direct hire authority So that allows us to use some of our fellowship and internship programs to bring people on in a much more accelerated fashion. I've also redoubled our efforts through our Human Capital Services Office to make sure that we can aggressively work through the federal hiring process. We are already more than halfway through this fiscal year, and we are more than halfway through our goal of hires for this year. Diversity, equity, inclusion is of primary importance with respect to what our workforce looks like. We have some work to do in that regard, and I'm delighted that we've established a program of employee resource groups as well as initiatives to work with the educational community through historically black colleges and universities and minority-serving institutions to help build that, if you will, that workforce that then can apply to our jobs.
Thank you very much. I see my time's expired, but it goes without saying that if you have a 22% budget cut, it will affect hiring. Is that correct?
Again, I think depending on what constraints and what guidance we're provided with, we would undoubtedly be faced with reductions in force with a cut of that magnitude.
Thank you, and I yield back.